Explain 1 Corinthians 13:7, where it says that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, etc. There are certainly times when we shouldn't, for example, believe something, so how do we reconcile this passage?
You know what? You're absolutely right. Jesus in Matthew 10:16 said that we need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And it's the idea of I don't need to be somebody who is just naive. And that, unfortunately, is something that happens with lots of Christians. They just believe things no matter who's saying them, and they don't. They have a tendency not to check things out. When he's speaking in this passage, though, it is the phrasing there in Greek. I'm looking at it right now. The phrasing there in Greek is that love believes all. And most likely what's being spoken about there is the idea of allowing for circumstances. I think that one of the things that we have to watch out for as Christians is being cynical about everything and just immediately believing the worst about somebody. I have this happen to me all the time. I'll make some kind of decision. Just happened this last week. I had made a decision about a problem that was going on in our church, and I had specific reasons for the things that I did. Comes down 5 months later, and I've people have left the church because I didn't handle it correctly. Never talked to me, never said anything, but it's just a situation where they don't know what was going on, and they've just decided. And a lot of times it has to do with people talking behind your back and that kind of thing. And so there's no room for allowances there, for maybe knowing what the circumstances are, or even finding out what they are. And Christians have to have a tendency to do this stuff all the time. I've had people say things that I've said, and it comes back to me, and it's not something I believe. And they go, "Well, you said it." And I go, "No, I don't believe that, so didn't say it." And pretty much most of the things that I say get put on tape, And so if I have said something that I don't believe, then that's called a slip of the tongue. That's called an error in my speech. And so I've had people take off on things, saying that I'd said things that I've never said, and what they were doing was gossiping and talking. Talking about me behind my back, and so that kind of stuff. It's and I'm not whining about it, although my name is Steve Winery. I'm winery when I'm whining, and I'm winery when I'm normal. So, in any case, I'm not whining about that stuff. That's just part of the territory. But it is a good example of things that Christians do that is out of line. Love believes all things. It's the idea of love allows for circumstances. And so one of the things that I've found over the years is that before I start going off, and I go off pretty quickly, if somebody does something really raunchy, I'm mad about it, pretty quickly. Especially if they've done it, not if they've done it to me necessarily, but if they've done it to somebody else in my church, it's like I just want to go after that stuff. And what I do is I shut my mouth, and I get more facts. And usually I give them a call and say, "Hey, what's going on? Did thus and such happen, this and that happen?" And I allow for circumstances, and I allow for the best in the person. Maybe they didn't know what was going on. Maybe they just misspoke. Maybe they, there's all kinds of situations that can be going on, and I can have gotten a bad report about somebody. And so I don't just walk into a situation and go off on it. And so I want to believe the best about people until I know it's not the best, and then then we talk about those things. But again, we're supposed to be harmless as doves and wise as serpents. There are people out to get you. There are people out to they have agendas, and so if somebody's telling me something about somebody behind their back, and it's negative, you guys, seriously, somebody's telling you something negative behind somebody's back, you don't believe it. You just don't. It's almost always a lie. And so if they're not willing to go up to the person and talk to them personally or take care of it in front of things. If they're going around behind somebody's back and doing this kind of stuff, just assume they're lying through their teeth, or that they're passing around lies, because that's most likely what's going on. I very rarely found somebody who has that kind of lifestyle, that kind of attitude, that was somebody who was telling the truth. So you got to watch out for it.
It's so refreshing too when Christians actually do this, because I know that we live in a world where there's a bunch of junk going on, and it tends to make people jaded, especially for humanity and stuff. Coming from law enforcement, that's
right.
One of those things. But when I first started getting more into ministry, like when I went out in Connell and stuff, there were things happening that were nothing but attacks, and there was nothing I could do. I remember one specifically, and I'm like, well, I'm getting fired, I'm getting kicked out. Because if it was me looking at the evidence, I'm done.
Yeah.
And the guys didn't do that. They were faithful to go, okay? And they told me, we believe you until we don't. And if there's a reason not to, then we're going to have issues. So they made that clear. Yeah. But if it's not that way, then Satan's just tooling people.
Yeah,
And he's out burning people, and it's easy for him to do because we're not being faithful to those passages, and we just run over people.
Right, yeah. And you don't want to do that. And, again, God gets in the middle of all that stuff, and he shows people to be liars and that kind of stuff. But you can cause a whole lot of damage to the cause of Christ when you're a gossip. And so, believe all things. It's like on the one hand, again, you don't want to be naive about stuff. And this is something that goes across the gamut of communication. Christians get into all kinds of goofy things. You'll see these situations come up on Facebook where somebody's talking about some miracle or this or that happened, or all these things that are supposedly going on. And one of the first things that I always do is just check out, try to find the story, try to check out if it actually happened, that kind of thing, and see if there's any reality to it. And if there is reality to it, then praise the Lord. Mm-hmm. And if there's not, I don't need to be passing on false information.
Right.
And so I want to believe the best about people, but then on the other hand, I want to be wise about it. Let me give you another example. With non-Christians, I've had non-Christians over the years who've come to me, and I've been talking to them about the Lord, and they'll tell me, well, I know this guy in your church, and this guy did this and this and that, and, that kind of stuff, said this, that or the other. And there have been times when I just believe the person. And I would always go to the guy and talk to him and go, hey, I just talked to so-and-so, and they said that you did this and that. And they go, that is not the story. Here's what actually took place. And then I find out that what the guy was doing was shading the story so that he didn't have to consider the gospel and that kind of stuff. And then I go back to that guy and go, you know what? What you said wasn't, did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen? And I get him to admit it and find out that, yeah, I wasn't getting the whole story. And so, when I'm talking to unbelievers, and they say something like that to me, I'll go, you know what, did that really happen? And I'll question them a little bit. And then if they're adamant about the fact that it actually took place, I'll go, okay, if that's true, then this is what should be happening with that whole thing. But I never dive into that and just believe what they say, because lots of people lie. And we live in a culture where it's common, and it's all too common among Christians. Yeah. And so you just have to watch out for it. But then on the other hand, you want to be somebody who allows for circumstances and believes the best about people. So
Amen.
There's a balance there.